Bill Gates said, "I will always choose a lazy person to do a difficult job because a lazy person will find an easy way to do it." What's a real life example of this? I was working as a stock boy in a supermarket, and when we had to fill the milk cooler, people would bust open a 12-pack of milk cartons and put them in one by one. On my first day, I just placed the 12-pack in the cooler and cut the plastic off on one side with my box cutter and yanked it from under it, and the look of the store manager and the other employee who was training me was pure bewilderment. From that day, everyone did it my way. Haha, I did this during the start of the pandemic with paper towels on an empty shelf. Thanks COVID panic buyers. Instead of opening the box of single roll paper towels and placing them on the shelf, I just cut off the bottom of the box and slid the rolls right out. Start of lockdown. My 9-year-old son was having worksheets emailed to complete at home. One day, left him at the laptop doing his maths while I made some dinner with my 3-year-old daughter. Walked into the living room with his dinner to find him asking the Alexa all of his maths questions. I wouldn't call that lazy so much as an intelligent use of the technology at hand. Learning and utilizing technology is probably a much better lesson learned than whatever the particular maths problems he was working on. I take your point, but he was actually doing it in the least efficient way possible. He memorized the equation he needed to ask, say 327 times 8, walked over to Alexa, asked her the equation, walked back to the laptop, walked back to Alexa to ask her again because he'd forgotten the last 2 digits, walk back to the laptop, enter the answer, walk back to Alexa to check it again. He had to keep walking backwards and forwards because he knew it was cheating, so he'd turned the volume down so I wouldn't hear from the next room. So while he thought he was being clever, he was actually taking more time to figure the answer out using the Alexa than it would have taken to do it himself. Plus, of course, there's the fact he was working on a laptop that has a calculator and a Cortana assistant that does the exact same as Alexa, and he knows how to use both the calculator and Cortana but still chose to cheat in the least efficient way possible. Worked as a laborer at a nursery one summer. Daily tasks included manually watering 15,000 plants each day. Put together a back of the napkin plan to build an irrigation system and spent the next few weeks building it with some money from the boss. That system is still running 15 years later and does all the work now. I did automate myself out of the job and had to find another eventually. Couple years later, got my engineering degree. I'm convinced engineers are inherently lazy people that will spend a disproportionate effort to make things easier. My brother-in-law spent a whole summer trying to figure out how to fix his sagging deck at the lake, which he could in theory crawl under and jack it up. It would have been a tunneling project. It's a 60x60 area all along 2x6 boards. Massive. I sat there long enough with enough beers in me to come up with the idea of just cutting a square out of the sagging area about 3 feet x 3 feet, jacking it up, then ray-screwing down the boards. He paints the thing every spring with a roller anyhow, so it's not like the square cut shows up. He thought I was a genius. I was just lazy. Finally, a non-computer story. We had to hold a thermometer in water in chemistry class. It probably was only 20-minute experiment, but your arms get tired after a couple minutes and you can't let the thermometer touch the bottom of the pan or it won't get an accurate reading. So instead of sucking it up and just holding the thermometer, my lab partner built a contraption out of lab books and paper clips to somehow hold the thermometer in the water without it touching bottom. It was the stupidest looking thing you would ever see in a lab class, and our professor even walked over and said, "If it looks stupid, sounds stupid, but it works, then it isn't stupid." My lab partner and I joke that he wasn't talking about the contraption but the intellect of my lab partner. I had a math teacher that actively encouraged his students to be as lazy as possible, defining lazy as actively searching for ways to do as minimal work as possible. His logic was that, the way math is now, it could always be simplified and still work the same. Someone just needs to be lazy enough to find that. I was a paid intern at a large company during one summer back home from college. My work 95% consisted of using SAP, import to Excel, clean data and generate reports, occasionally create some tool someone needed. In the first 2 weeks after getting a hang of my responsibilities, writing all the Excel formulas needed, and basically automating 99% of my work, I was chilling. I went from actually working from 9-5 to maybe 1 hour tops a day. Finding, importing, cleaning, and reporting usually took hours, but with all the formulas it took 2 minutes of clicking. I then helped the other cool intern get his crap set up so we could both just chill. We could take 2-hour lunches, paid for by the company, and nobody said anything cause we were just getting so much more done than the other interns. Of course I helped for special tasks when asked, but those were simple 20 minutes tasks building something in Excel. Overall, was the easiest stress-less internship of my life. The clerk was asked to bring 145 white papers into the office. He doesn't want to count the papers manually, so he printed 145 blank sheets and took them in. Smart. He used a machine that counts as one of its functions, but not the primary function, to do the counting for him. It's just enough outside of the box that most people wouldn't think to do it at all. Plus, as a bonus, they are all nice and warm. One of my favorite examples is Andy Kim. And I'd like to preface this by saying that I don't think Kim is lazy so much as a genius. Andrew Yao Kim was a singer-songwriter who became famous under the stage name Andy Kim. He achieved success writing songs for bands like the Archies, possibly most notably Sugar. After his success he coasted for a while until his record label dropped him for lack of output. At that point he created his own label and cranked out hits like Rock Me Gently. When they saw this, the big record labels then bought his label under the assumption that they would then profit off of the songs he wrote and performed. He then very shortly stopped writing songs and largely lived off the sale of his label. Work smarter, not harder. And be a genius. Let's not forget the most important part here. It took me like 3 months, but I automated a data pipeline to extract data, clean it up, and spit it out in an Excel or PDF format to one of our clients. I walked over to shoot the breeze with the lady who handles my client and gives me tasks, and she told me we make 40k off them every month for that automated job. Duck, I need to go start my own business. When Carl Friedrich Gauss, the famous German mathematician and physicist, was in elementary school, around 1784, his class was assigned the busy work task of adding all the numbers from 1 to 100, 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4, and so on. This usually kept the class quiet for half an hour or so. 7-year-old Carl was sitting quietly with the correct answer, 5050, while the rest of the class was just starting, so the surprise teacher asked him how he came up with the solution. He replied that he added 1 and 100 and got 101. Then he added 2 and 99, and got 101, 3 plus 98 equals 101, and so on. He realized there was a pattern of 50 pairs of numbers with each pair adding up to 101. And 50x 101 equals 5050. When I was in college I had a job at an Italian fast food place with a reputation for its breadsticks. They came in frozen and needed a bit to thaw, so we'd take a giant 3x4 feet aluminum baking sheet, spread them out in a single layer with no spaces and cover it with a plastic bag, then leave it sit in the walk-in overnight. The next day you'd have to get a pair of tongs and move each stick to a new tray, turning them over, then cover the new tray with the bag and let them sit on racks for a couple of hours before brushing on the garlic butter sauce. This was tedious enough that you'd usually be ready to brush the butter on the first tray as soon as you turned the last tray. I was given this task for the first time one morning and just did not want to deal with it. I realized if I put the second tray upside down on top of the first one then turned it over and took the first tray out, I got exactly the same results. Blew the boss's mind when I did the 3-hour job in about 15 minutes. I was given a $0.05 hour raise. I saved my company thousands when I noticed a pattern of orders then all turned out to be one guy using stolen cards, and then another cheating the system to get expensive things for a few euros. Didn't even get the lowest meaningless reward possible. Not even a thanks. Similar thing happened to me. I noticed that my office was not properly billing for services and we were losing an average of about $5k a month. When I showed this to the CFO, I was treated like it was my fault. I work in healthcare and billing is done off-site. I was once set to test a certain piece of equipment on a ship. The test involved attaching the unit to a reader, then run loads of command line commands. Then, one would have to make a copy of all the text, copy it into Word and save it as a real crappy looking report. There was hundreds of units, and they needed to be tested several times a year. We did about 20-30 a day. It would take several weeks to finish. I didn't know coding at the time, but always wanted to learn it. Within 2 months, I had made a program, even with a GUI, to spot faults with ease, instead of having to actually read the reports. The program could read 3 units at a time, and would automatically create a smooth PDF report and save it on our server, named with serial number and date. The job was now to attach 3 units, then wait for about 3 minutes, detach and attach new ones. Basically 30 seconds work, 3 minutes break. I could now test all units in a day, though I would typically spread it out over a couple more days. When I left the company, I left the program on the test computer. I got an email from an ex-colleague a few months later, saying they were using the program on several ships now. There wasn't any manual for the program, of course, but it was so straightforward that it wasn't needed. An older company had a person dedicated to data entry, which boiled down to copying and pasting portions of data from text files into spreadsheet and formatting into a report. The person originally doing this job spent a full 40+ hours a week doing it, but was not very computer literate. When they retired, the company hired someone with actual skills. The new hire convinced management to let her work remotely after getting up to speed on the job. The first week at home was spent automating the entire job. The remainder of their multi-year tenure with the company was spent doing whatever they wanted save the 10-15 minutes weekly to run their program and to answer the odd email here and there. All while getting paid full salary and benefits. They actually had to add in a few errors now and then to make it seem realistic. My girlfriend works for an insurance company and basically spent months working on spreadsheets to compile quarterly vendor claims for the last 10 years, each quarter with thousands of rows. I just finished my MS in analytics. I spent a few hours with her asking exactly what she needed to do. Wrote 3 lines of code in SQLite and basically saved her months of work. Now when she has to work in these projects she runs the program and that's that. I was pretty proud of that. Nice work. I once put 4 people out of work for writing a really effective reporting system. I got $100 to Morton's Steakhouse. They got canned, and sadly they were friends. I find inefficiency all the time, but that inefficiency keeps people fed sometimes. Software and automation doesn't really reduce jobs but shifts them, sometimes away from your friends. I still remember a regular post story of a guy who walked into a new job. And the first thing he ran into this girl that starts out by complaining about how she has to spend so much time taking information from emails, putting them into a spreadsheet. He thought she was complaining about how hard it was, etc. On his lunch break he wrote a basic program to automate that entire process. The guy is super excited to impress the boss and make this girl's day so much better. As he shows him, the boss's eyes light up with excitement, but the girl looks terrified. Next thing the boss takes the girl into his office. And she comes out teary-eyed, gathers her stuff and leaves. Turns out she wasn't complaining, she was boasting about how much she does. Unfortunately for her that was literally her entire job. That's the secret to improving your efficiency that much. You've got to play it as getting more work done in the same amount of time. If you usually spend 8 hours producing 800 units, and now you spend 2 hours producing 1000 units, you need to frame it as spending 8 hours producing 1000 units. Never spin it as getting more work done in less time, unless you're willing to accept that you'll be given more work. Because if you can produce 1000 units in a quarter of the time, you'll now be expected to produce 4000 units a day. This work was part of the German government service civil service, öffentlicher Dienst. You don't get raises because you do something better, etc. You'll get paid by the back. Beschreibung des Aufgabenkreises. Description of the task plus, back then, by how long you are part PF the civil service and on your age, which also had impact on vacation days. I was there for 15 years in different positions and at the end I had 31 days of paid vacation. So, with a 5-day working week that's 6 weeks. So pay-wise this didn't had any impact of my income. But I got a great review and later applied to another job within the civil service with even less work and better payment. I applied to a better paid position within the educational center, called Lehrstellenbetreuer or teaching facility coordinator. My task was to assure that rooms that were outside, important, of the education center were available for the students when they needed them. E.g. English was taught in a room in a regular school, so I had to contact the janitor of that school to make sure that the main door of the school was open, the classroom as well to the students, plus that enough tables chairs were there too, etc. In most cases 50-75% of all rooms that were needed were outside of the educational center. So, I applied to that job, got it thanks to my awesome reviews, and within my first week with that new job I heard that we are moving to another place. My boss said take some vacation and then start refreshed, which I did. 4 weeks vacation at the beach. When I came back I was surprised that we not only moved to a way bigger building but also that almost all teaching places are now within the educational center. Now just 5% of all courses took place outside of the center itself, like ornithology courses which need no organizer like me, because forests woods are open to everyone. That meant that I had no area of responsibility anymore, because thanks to the back the responsibility for all teaching places within the educational center building was the duty of the executive director. You may now think, well, obviously the executive director would delegate that to me. Well, that's not possible because if the director would do that and I would accept the duty, I would also be entitled to way more income. In that case the income of the executive director. So, now I sat there 8 hours a day, doing way less than before, getting way more money. German civil service at its best. 2 years of doing nothing is awful. Imagine waking up in the morning to go to work, knowing that it wouldn't make any difference if you are there or not. Became depressed there. Felt useless af. I worked goods in for an aircraft manufacturer as a summer job at university. Parts would arrive, we'd open them and key in all the details into a terminal. That bit was long-winded. I discovered the terminal keyboard has assignable shortcuts, and set up a bunch of them for all the boilerplate such that keying in an item was about 6 keystrokes. Saved myself and my workmate hours every day, which we would spend pranking each other, other warehouse staff and staff at other sites. I had a manager in my 20s who detested the fact I turned a 2-hour process into a 15-minute process. It exposed how much lazier he was compared to me because when the higher-ups learned from other people at my level that I created the program, they took me aside and told me he took credit for it. They asked me how I felt about that. I told them what decisions they make regarding the manager's character is their decision. Just put yourselves in my shoes and consider it from that angle. They did nothing and I took the concept to a competitor who invested the money into making the program more robust and proprietary. My name was line 1 on the patent and trademark documents and I did well enough to semi-retire at 45. I credit Lee Iacocca for the inspiration. He went through a similar problem with higher ups at Ford and his answer was to take his brain to Chrysler who would value it. Back in high school a lot of kids used to walk through his park to get home to school. A portion of the path went into the woods because it was just quicker than walking the actual trail. At one point in the walk through the woods, you had to go up this small but tedious hill, nothing major but it took like 10 seconds of hard work to go up it. You couldn't go around because one side was a small cliff to the creek below and other side had dense trees. One summer, a bunch of us got together and decided to just dig through that hill to make it flat. It took like 14 of us 3 good days to get through it. It was a hard 3 days but it was definitely worth it. Saved 10 seconds of hill climbing every morning and afternoon, 150 plus days of the year. And it wasn't just us, but hundreds of other kids who took the same party every day. Sometimes you need to put in a lot of work so your future selves can enjoy the easy way out. Some future railroad surveyors right here. Pretty sure they had an idea, and then worked hard for 3 days to get it operational. Doesn't sound like a surveyor. More the general attitude of duck you, mountain, this is a level path now. Railroads have this game they play, you see. You go forward 100 feet, and if you are 3 feet higher or lower than you started, you lose. Then you do it again, until you cross a whole continent. I was invited to my friend's yearly apple picking. It was a full day of apples and kids and filling a truck for cider. I'm lazy and suggested we make the process more efficient with tarps on the ground. We managed in 2 hours what historically took all day. We didn't even get to the picnic lunch. Essentially, I ruined apple picking. Walkie-talkies. In every job I've ever had, these things make your day far less labor intensive if used correctly. In Australia, explorers discovered a mountain that was taller than Mt Kosciuszko, which was thought to be the tallest mountain in Australia. Rather than cause confusion by telling everyone a new tallest mountain had been found, they simply named the new mountain Mt Kosciuszko and renamed the original to something else. Sounds like Hanlon's razor. The German general Kurt von Hammerstein-Eckert used Hanlon's razor to assess his men, saying, "I divide my officers into 4 groups. There are clever, diligent, stupid, and lazy officers. Usually 2 characteristics are combined. Some are clever and diligent, their place is the general staff. The next lot are stupid and lazy, they make up 90% of every army and are suited to routine duties. Anyone who is both clever and lazy is qualified for the highest leadership duties, because he possesses the intellectual clarity and the composure necessary for difficult decisions. One must beware of anyone who is stupid and diligent. He must not be entrusted with any responsibility because he will always cause only mischief." I knew a guy who had a low-level data reporting job. He had several daily weekly work responsibilities, including a bunch of reports that needed quite a bit of tweaking from raw data to finished product. But like I said, low level. We didn't find out until way later, but he had set up macros for each of his major responsibilities where he could. Once set up, he'd just run the macros to do his work, but then he'd, smartly, hold off on delivering the reports until just a little before the deadlines. He'd hit every assignment and was seen as reliable. He also would complain about the workload so people would leave him with that work. I doubt he did a full hour of work a day after he set up what he did. Eventually he left the job for one with better pay. But damn did he work lazy. Also, he was smart not to reveal until the end, because had he told them about it he would have gotten a pat on the back and would have been given a whole other workload, on top of maintaining those macros etc. Dude milked the job, not the other way around. I know a guy who did this, but he revealed it. The company shared the macros with all the employees. It made everyone's life easier, but they also got an increased workload. The company made a lot more money. And this guy made none of it. He didn't even get promoted. The secret is shameless self-promotion. Use secret scripts and automation, but instead of telling everyone else how awesome your scripts are and how well automated everything is, use the output, work, from those and tell everyone how good you are at these tasks and reports and how well you've got it handled. Hopefully this hasn't been posted yet. Basically, in order to restart a server, they made a robot that would eject its CD tray every time it couldn't ping it. At the turn of the 21st century, in a trough the global server infrastructure began showing cracks. Anyone that had been in the server room could immediately tell that its growth had been organic. Rack-mounted servers sat next to rack-commissioned workstations, with cables barely secured by cable ties. Clearly there had been some effort to clean things up a bit, but whoever put forth that effort gave up halfway through. It wasn't pretty, but it worked for years. As time passed, though, a proprietary gateway server to communicate with credit processing agencies would crash more and more frequently. And these were bad crashes, too, the kind of crashes where the server wouldn't respond to ping and would have to be restarted manually. It wasn't really a big deal for the admin, Eric, to hit the restart button on the server when he was there, but that was only 40 hours a week. The credit union needed it to be active 24/7, but was unwilling to hire 24-hour staff in the data center. The problem kept getting worse and worse, so the manager called up a meeting. "Okay guys, what can we do about this?" asked Laura, the manager. "Can you guys in dev fix this?" "No," began Eric, before anyone in dev could respond. The issue is with the server, not our software. Well, when does the support contract end? 2 years ago. Great. And we can't replace the unit while we're in a budget freeze. Laura wasn't sure what to do. Well, what's our workaround for now? What happens when it goes down? Right now, I just hit the restart button. Okay, well, we'll have to replace it once I get the budget approved. For now, though, what can we do? We need this online all the time. Laura sighed and began tapping her pen on the table. No one has any other ideas? At this point the room fell silent and everyone tried to avoid making eye contact with Laura. Eric had a script running that would ping the server every few minutes and alert him if it didn't respond so he could halfway proactively keep things running. It had to be restarted manually whenever it crashed, so there was no easy way to fix it remotely. We could build an admin robot, Eric joked. Hours later, Eric was in the data center, hitting the restart button again, disappointed that the meeting had ended without a workable solution. Laura walked into the room and greeted Eric. So, at our meeting earlier, you suggested building a robot. Laura had apparently taken his suggestion seriously. Is that something we can really do? Well, I was just I don't know anything about circuitry or how to build robots. Eric tried to keep his tone somewhere between serious and kidding, so he could gauge Laura's reaction. It was then that he idly looked at his computer, which had just ejected a disk image DVD he'd burned. It sparked an idea, but it was too absurd to say out loud. Still, he couldn't help but chuckle at the thought. What? Laura asked. It's nothing, Eric responded. It's stupid. We're desperate. Do you have an idea? No, it was really stupid. Eric sighed. I just had the idea that a CD-ROM drive in an old system could eject and hit the reset button. It was a ridiculous idea. Wait, Laura began, could you really do that? It was another uncomfortable moment for Eric, but she seemed serious, so he just went for it. Yeah, I could, but it's hardly the best solution. I'd have to position the servers just right, somehow get the heights and alignment correct, and update the polling script to eject the CD-ROM drive anytime it didn't respond to ping. And that was exactly what Eric found himself spending the rest of the afternoon setting up. He found an old PC, updated his script to ping the server every 2 minutes and eject if there was no response, and with the help of a few phone books found the perfect height and position on the floor. At any point while he was setting it up, he expected Laura to jump out from a corner and yell just kidding, but it never happened. Finally, Eric stood up and ashamedly admired his work. He slapped a label on it that read IT Appmon Robot and another below with big underlined letters that read Do Not Move. Years later, and long after Eric had left, the faulty server was taken offline and replaced with a new one working under a new IP address. During the swap, IT Appmon Robot was moved to a neglected corner of the server room, plugged back in, and promptly forgotten. It spent the last weeks of its life dutifully opening and closing its CD-ROM drive every 2 minutes, reaching in vain for the restart button that it'd never touch again. Hey, thanks for making it all the way to the end, you absolute Chad. You're a legend. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to like and subscribe for more of Reddit's top content. I'll see you in the next video, you beautiful people.